Those things. Want to mention Nick Clegg did come onto the Stafford Hospital subject, and thanks to a friendly question from Jim Devine, torture also came up as you suggested it would. We are going to go away though remembering that rebuke, aren't we?
Well, I think the extraordinary thing about today, and I do think this was a moment in politics actually, was that Gordon Brown, I suspect, would have stayed awake at night worrying about what he would say on the day this happened. In other words, unemployment had the largest monthly rise ever and went through the 2 million mark. How would he deal with it? Would he be forgiven? Would this be a moment in which people say Labour have failed? Yet the person who will be staying awake tonight will be David Cameron, who will be thinking, I blew it. The goal was open. I fired it over the bar. Because for the only memorable thing from that exchange to be him insulting the Prime Minister, particularly coming a week after he'd praised the Prime Minister for the way he'd handled the death of his son, to then be rebuked by the Speaker and forced to withdraw. You could see in the body language, at the end of his last question, David Cameron slumped and looked at his papers. It is one of those moments in which a leader of the opposition knows that the spotlight is on him, and there's no nicer way of putting it than to say he blew it.
Well, I mean, we've been looking into this because we couldn't remember if this had happened before. He certainly has been asked to rephrase a question before, but never to take it back. I wonder if this might be, and there's been an awful lot in the papers of late saying, well, the Tories should be far further ahead than they are considering the current situation. Is this perhaps jitters going on? Is that why this happened?
I think it is very interesting that when you consider and compare the situation now with the situation prior to 1997, when a Conservative government was doing very badly, the lead that the Conservative opposition now has is very modest. And I think that today's exchanges summed up why. Terrible figures on unemployment today, an absolute open goal, as Nick said, on the whole economy thing. David Cameron raised that issue, but it didn't come off, and it wasn't just his mistake over using the word phony. It was a sense, I think, which Gordon Brown was also reflecting, that the Tories don't really have much to say on the economic agenda, that a lot of the impressions of policy that David Cameron was coming out on in terms of extra capital expenditure on colleges are actually directly contradicted by Tory policy to cut back on spending. And that's why Gordon Brown was able to do relatively okay on a day when the government really should have been on the back foot, not just on the economy, but on health, as Nick Clegg also raised very effectively.
Thank you both very much. Let's find out what they made of this in Brussels, because I know, Andrew, you were listening as well.
By the magic of the magic lantern, we were indeed watching here in Brussels. We have a different view of the phony thing, I think. I'm going to come to that in a minute, though, but let's go to the big issue.